Hi. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining us. Really excited that you're here. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Jessica Monette, and as director of the Anderson Collection at Stanford University, it's truly my great pleasure to welcome you here, to have you share in this space and this energy in celebration of the third exhibition of the Anderson Collection at Stanford University's 10th anniversary year. Thank you all for being a part of it. The entire team at the Anderson Collection is honored and humbled to be presenting artwork by 16 remarkable artists on view in our exhibition, The Journey Continues. This inspiring group of women work across a range of materials, including painting, ceramic, fabric, collage, found objects, and much more. Some of which you see examples of here. Some blend multiple mediums and backgrounds, and all execute artwork at the highest levels, reflecting, perhaps not surprisingly, two of the Anderson collections and Anderson families' guiding principles, namely the head and the hands. Consider here the combination of concept and execution, of idea and craftsmanship, of inspiration and facility with their chosen medium. It's going to be a good talk. To this idea of the head and the hands, the exhibiting artists add their hearts. Their work evokes a range of emotions. Their practices engage the personal, ask of themselves and us hard questions, and invite the viewer into a vivid, welcoming world of contemplation, paradox, and play. These artists explore the tensions and slippage between the personal and political, abstraction and representation, labor and power, individual and shared experiences, and remind us of how these connections between mythology, history, and contemporary social issues are ever present. How lucky we are that these artists share so generously and provide the possibilities for creating spaces that allow unbounded ways of being. Thank you to the artists, collectors, gallerists, and colleagues joining us tonight from near and far. We know that many of you have traveled, and we are grateful for your presence. We are excited that you're engaging with this exhibition and the related programs throughout the rest of this year. We've scheduled some very special programs this spring, and so I would love for you to just keep an eye out for some upcoming information on April events, including the Museum as Muse collaboration with Stanford's Creative Writing Department and Stanford Cinematheque in collaboration with the wonderful graduate students in the Department of Art and Art History. And please mark your calendars for a very special event on May 5th, the McMurtry Lecture, celebrating the artist Arlene Sheckett, whose work is on view in The Journey Continues, in conversation with Stanford's own Alexander Nemerov. There are many people to thank, and tonight's program, The Journey Continues exhibition, is possible because of the hard work and support of so many. I'd like to thank our key exhibition funders, William Reller and Kristen E. Clint, the doctors Ben and A. Jess Shenson Fund, and our wonderful community of museum members. A huge thank you to all of you. It's because of you, our members and supporters, that we are able to present this exhibition at the museum, offer admission free to everyone, and present programs representing a diversity of voices for all audiences. This is true at the Anderson and at the Cantor. To those of you who are attending and might not yet be members, should you have interest, please don't hesitate to talk to us about it. We welcome members in our community at all times. University art museums are special places, in large part due to the wonderful students, faculty, and staff who help shape this shared space. Thank you for joining us here tonight. Thank you for your partnerships with this exhibition and with all that we do. So much happens behind the scenes, and I would like to take a minute to thank the Anderson team. Jean McDougall, Lanisha Brown, Joa Suarez, and Tricia Legasso-Goldberg for your invaluable work on this exhibition and tonight's program. A special bow of appreciation to Tricia, who came on as our interim director of programming and engagement, our guest curator of programming and engagement for the 10th anniversary, and has done a remarkable job. Maria Jose Alvarez and Maggie Reyes for their communication acumen, Latrice Ross and our security team, Francisco Salcedo for his care of the museum maintenance, and Ashley McGrew and Brooks Manbeck at Cantor for their recent preparedor support in lighting our exhibition. The VPA is such a special place, and that's due in large part to Anne Sherlock, Assistant Vice President for the Arts, and Deborah Cullinan, Vice President for the Arts, whose leadership, vision, and unwavering support insist upon the essential and consequential nature of art. The magic of this exhibition really comes from the keen eye and incredible generous spirit of Mary Patricia Anderson Pence, known better as Butter. Her unwavering support of artists and dedication to the museum at Stanford is on show in the Wish Family Gallery and throughout the museum. Amazingly, the artworks included in The Journey Continues are all on loan from Butter and collected by her in the last 10 years. These works reflect her eye, her family's legacy and love of living with art, and help chart a direction for the second decade of the Anderson Collection at Stanford University, as we continue inviting contemporary artists into dialogue with the museum's core collection and all of you. I'll be back in a moment to introduce our program, but it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Butter. Butter, come on up.
Thank you for everyone at the museum for an incredible show. You did a superb job, and the work has never looked better. And I'm so excited I have them. I don't have really anything prepared, but I just wanted to say a few words about the women that I collect, but I also want to tell you I do collect men. I know. And Moo and Hung clearly ingrained me to be curious, and I hope that comes through with the works that you'll see tonight. Dad always said, could I have thought of it? Have I ever seen it before? And in this show, I think it really relates. For example, the Natalie Ball piece. Oh, look at that. Natalie Ball with the upside down cowboy boot and expressing her heritage, to Teresa Baker's use of AstroTurf. I just fell in love with it, given I'm a golfer. Sadie Barnett, I was exposed to with her horse racing forms, and I just loved horses, and I love the number 4. So it really comes down to just a personal reaction to when you see a work of art. For me, Masako's beautiful little wool piece, I thought the medium was quite special and interesting. Arlene Checkett, I actually met 20 years ago in her studio, and have been following the work, and I finally purchased the one you'll see in the other gallery. Dee Clements was a new artist who mixes reeds and ceramics, and I thought that was super interesting. Michaela Yearwood Dan, I had the pleasure of taking around the museum last fog. What a brilliant young woman. She was just incredible, and I love the way that she used the paintings as well as the ceramics in the work. Brie Ruais, who is here tonight, I purchased many, many years ago. I just love the tactileness of it, and she'll tell you more about it, but it's going to go in my home in Lake Tahoe, because I just love it so much. Sadie Benning I bought because I thought it was leather, and it's not leather, but nobody touch it. Gene Connor was married to Bruce, and he got all the credit, but I really had seen that great My Octopus Teacher, and I was like, oh, I gotta have this piece. So Sheila Hicks was a very good friend of Joseph Albert's, and as you know, Joseph were really good friends with him, and his wife Annie. So somehow Sheila clicked with me. Claudia Weiser was a wonderful woman who I've worked with, and I went to actually Paris to buy the piece from Jessica to bring it home to Faxon. So she's a wonderful artist. So I just want you to know how fortunate I am to live with such wonderful works of art, and I hope you will enjoy the show and get a lot out of it.
Thank you, Potter, for sharing those stories and for sharing those inspirations. Tonight's program is a super special one, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge how lucky we are to have two remarkable artists, Brie Ruais and Masako Miki, here with us in conversation with Jessica Monette. Jessica is a multidisciplinary artist from New Orleans, working here in the Bay Area. She's one of our own, quite fortunately, as a lecturer in art practice at Stanford and an alumna of Stanford, having received her MFA in art practice here in 2024. If you haven't seen Jessica's work, you need to. Themes she investigates include the maintenance and expansion of cultural retention throughout the African diaspora, ancestral influences, colonialism, identity, marginalization, and the political and social implications of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Jessica oscillates between mediums such as painting, sculpture, and installation to examine the intricacies of Black existence. Jessica was the recipient of the Emerging Artist Program at the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco, a highly competitive program. Jessica was one of 5, I think, Bay Area artists who were awarded this opportunity to have a solo exhibition at the museum, and whose work was on view there at the end of last year, fall and December, and November, December. Jessica's exhibition was called Unveiling Histories, a Fabricated Archive. And that exhibition was a deeply personal one that explored and traced fragments of Jessica's lineage and the challenges of sustaining a familial archive. And for the show, you did this amazing thing by fabricating an archive that documented colonial and ancestral pasts reshaped by these historical influences. And I recently had the tremendous opportunity to join Jessica in a class with her students here in the Denning Family Resource Center. Jessica comes with her students to the museum. And I got to spend some time with Jessica and the students, and it was marvelous. And I'm just thrilled that she's here. She asks thoughtful questions, she encourages meaningful conversations, and really comes with this full, warm heart. And so I'd like to welcome Jessica together with Brie Ruais and Masako Miki for a really exciting conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That was very...
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight we'll engage in dialogue centered around Brie and Masako's work, delving into their creative processes and the narratives they bring to life. After our discussion, we'll open the floor for audience questions, followed with exhibition viewing, so you'll have a chance to see how these ideas take shape in the artwork. The viewing will continue until about 8 p.m. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce our panelists and share a bit about their backgrounds. Let's begin with Masako Miki. Masako is a multimedia artist whose practice spans textile, sculpture, watercolor, and large-scale public installations, exploring the intersections of mythology, folklore, and contemporary social narratives. Drawing inspiration from Shinto animism, Miki crafts new mythologies that examine cultural identity within social collectives. Her immersive felt sculptural installations and watercolors work on paper have been exhibited in both U.S. and internationally at institutions such as the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive and the DeYoung Museum. She's also been an artist in residence at the DeYoung Museum and Facebook headquarters, and was awarded the 2018 Inga Marin-Otto Fellowship with Watermill Center in New York. Miki's work is part of esteemed collections, including the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Colección Solo in Spain, the Bert Hoffman Watermill Foundation, Meta, and BAMPA. Her monumental outdoor public art installations can be seen at Uber headquarters in San Francisco, Obey Coastal Park in Shenzhen, China, and currently she is collaborating with SF MoMA and San Francisco Arts Commission on the Mina and Natoma Street Corridor project, designing functional sculptures. Originally from Japan, Miki is now based in Berkeley, California. She's represented by Ryan Lee Gallery in New York and Jessica Silverman Gallery in San Francisco. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Brie Ruais. Brie Ruais is a sculptor whose process-driven ceramic sculptures, video, and installations explore relationality between the body, material, and the natural world. Ruais engages in physical dialogue with the material, pushing, tearing, and shaping it into expansive forms that map movement and transformation. Her work is deeply connected to the landscape and the elements, drawing from lived experiences of solitude, grief, and joy. Ruais has exhibited her large-scale ceramic installations and video works in the US and internationally. Her work has been shown at institutions including the Dallas Museum of Art, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, Emerson Museum of Art, and Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. She has been awarded residencies at the Moody Center for the Arts and Contemporary Craft, among others. Her work is in the collections of institutions such as the Hayward Gallery in London and the MFA Boston. Ruais' large-scale sculpture installations explores the intersectionality of the body, movement, and material. With recent works on view in major exhibitions, originally from Southern California, she's now based in New Mexico. She's represented by Knight Gallery in Los Angeles and Albert's Venda in New York. So now that we have a bit of background on both of you, can you please give us a little bit of, an extra bit of background on your practice and kind of where you are in your practice? Start with you, Masako. You want to
Use the microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. Yeah.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Am I too loud or too?
Perfect.
No, it's good? Okay, all right. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it, Patty. And then the Anderson collection here, and then Jessica and Sarah, thank you so much for all the support. I am so grateful to be part of this conversation tonight. Thank you. And then Brie. So I think we can kind of progress my practice as we go through, but I consider myself as a multimedia artist. I do textile felt sculptures, watercolor, I work in 2D. I do the large size of mural. I think right now the YBCA still has this big, the facade image. It's wrapping pretty much the entire facade of the museum portion. And then I work with the metal, the bronze, and then aluminum recently. So I do large public art sculpture as well. And my ideas about work is really about sort of question about who we are, going through the mythologies, and the mythology is actually the study of myth, and myth is actually the particular stories. And I'm using my own Shinto-related folklore and myth to really reveal something that I think it's important to have in this contemporary conversation. So I found the myth as a tool to really speak about our identities and why that story is so important to talk about it right now. And hopefully I can elaborate that a little bit more. And then I live in Berkeley, and my studio is located in Berkeley as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a, does this sound okay? Okay, I made a special request.
Okay, smart. Next time.
Because I've held a microphone before and it makes me nervous.
Yes.
More nervous. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you to Putter for including me in your love of art, and to Jessica for this thoughtful engagement with all of our works, I think, too, because I respect that you're coming here as an artist who deeply understands these processes and the experiences. And to everyone here for attending and for your interest and enthusiasm in art. And the staff, of course, and Jason for bringing everything together. And to just talk briefly about the kind of beginning or maybe fundamentals of my work. Began with a really deep interest in physical encounter. That I have been always curious about this space where the inner world, everyone's inner world meets the outer world, and how we are shaped and shapers of that mutual existence. And as a sculptor, I applied that to form and thought, how can form emerge from an encounter, from two bodies coming together or having an interaction? So I started with 25 pounds of clay and I started kicking it because I thought, I don't want to think about what this thing is going to look like and then make that happen and control it in that way. I want the form to be the result of this engagement. And so I started using these actions, and very inspired by people like Linda Banglis, especially. And I saw that the forms that emerged were great, but they didn't capture the full breadth of my physical movement. So they didn't tell the whole story. And that's when I decided to scale up to 130 pounds, which is my body weight in clay. And I feel very redundant saying that, but it is very key to the way that I approach everything in my work. So this 130 pounds of clay is, I have an equivalency with that in some regard in terms of weight, close-ish in volume, and maybe energetically. I like to think that there's as much pushing back on me as I'm putting or pressing against the material. And that's when I started enacting these, I call them movement compositions. So I would bring 130 pounds of clay on the floor, usually on butcher paper or plastic, and enact a set of movements which are revealed by the surface of the clay. So you see the way that the work was, or the clay was pushed, the directionality, the full immersive quality that I'm making the work, the piece in the exhibition right now, for instance, I was in the center of the clay, pushing outward, and then rotating and kept pushing. And so the resulting form is circular. And that wasn't the goal, but that is the result. And you see knee prints in the middle, you see, what is this called, the palm? Yeah, the heel of my palm, my knuckles, as I push the material outwards. And so it's, I think of it as a record, a rubbing or a map maybe of this encounter.
Thank you. Yeah, so kind of bouncing off of what you were just talking about in terms of material, like how did you arrive at, both of you, how did you arrive at the materials that you are working with? I don't know who wants to jump in.
Okay. I also just wanted to mention, thank you so much, Jessica, for the thoughtful order of the slides. It wasn't just like what we sent and you curated it, so it's just the thoughtfulness of this talk today, so thank you. Thank you. So, is this?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so, I think when you say encounter the materials, I think it's just like life. The way I encountered the felt was very unexpected. I was teaching at UC Davis, and then other professor actually, Lucy Paul, actually lives very close to my house. And I visited her studio, and she just had this little white teddy bear, which was very unexpected from her practice. And she recommended, like, I just took the workshop, and it was really fun. And it was just kind of, at the time, I was making very realistic rendering of the animals, was a pen and ink drawing. So like that sculptural practice seems kind of fun. So I never expected that this becomes my main, like, the material that I'm going to be exploring. But I took the workshop and I just loved it because there's no pressure in the sense that I wasn't trying to make anything that's, I don't know, that precious that has to go somewhere. It was just like the things that I've done in my studio. So I also really enjoy this sort of tactile nature of the materials and also the accessibility of it, that I don't have to have this years of training of applying myself to the sculpture process. You need a lot of patience though. And you poke yourself, so you do. And it comes the next day that all of these pains that I don't know why my fingers are so and it's all this sort of the poking. So, I really truly feel like it was just a kind of serendipity to me that since I wasn't expecting anything, I encountered something that's very meaningful. And then I also, before the practice, I was making paper lanterns as an installation. When I did this long residency program in Japan, I worked with the paper studio, and it was the Indigo Dye studio. It's the national treasure of the Indigo Dye artist. And so, I think the paper was very familiar to me. And also the paper kind of gives more direct connections. I started as an oil painter, and then at the time, my sort of relationship with the paper became more raw, and just directness. I really enjoy that practice. And then also the paper always somewhat considered as a secondary sources in the fine art practice because the drawings are more permanently, processed to the oil painting, so that I also like that kind of it just feels more honest. So that was, since then I've been, just really practicing those two mediums. And so far I really like that. And I'm open to do like a more, different like experimentation and medium as well. But so far, these two mediums I've been using as a sort of like a primary medium.
Yeah, it sounds like the tactileness of the felt and the immediacy of the watercolor really spoke to you in your practice. And how about you, Brie?
I relate to a lot of what you said. Clay, I arrived at clay because of its familiarity. I had worked with clay as a young teen, doing after-school art programs, and then went on to study art in an interdisciplinary program. So I didn't focus on clay, and it wasn't until I was in graduate school that the ideas that I was working with brought me back to clay. The idea of clay as it's a material that looks like where it came from. Like you know where it came from. We already have a affinity with it in our daily lives. It carries that sense of touch, that human engagement from very, very early on, right? The first humans to work with clay was 30,000 years ago, and they were making figurines. So they weren't making functional objects, they were making objects to make sense of their world, and that also reflected themselves in the world. And I think I was lucky in a sense not to have studied ceramics because I didn't have to de-skill. But I had a skilled practice in a lot of other media, which sounds to me like you had that as well, and so you could kind of approach felt with the understanding of how a material might work. And also clay, not clay, the etymology of the word material is mater in Latin, which is Greek, Latin for mother, so the source. And so it made sense to me that I was drawn to this material clay, which to me is from the source.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I'm thinking about both of what you were just speaking to in terms of materials and the everyday and the quotidian, and then like the hierarchies of those materials. So like, how do you think your works challenge the traditional hierarchies, both in material value and even in knowledge system values? So specifically, how do you reclaim materials like clay and felt while also elevating folklore and non-Western belief systems as valid sources of understanding?
Yeah. I'll go first. Take it off your plate. I think, I made some notes about this. I think that, I hope that I'm kind of approaching clay in a pre-craft, pre-skill kind of way, as a getting to a kind of primal experience with the material. And so I think maybe that is working differently from Western expectations, the way that we're used to seeing it. I think that we're so used to seeing ceramics as artifacts, right, and as records of human civilization. And I think I'm kind of trying to flip that and look at, the way that I approached the piece that's on exhibition is by looking at a landscape that had been very disrupted by human forces. And so instead of seeing clay as a kind of story of human civilization, seeing it as the Earth's story of human occupation or human relationship. Like, I don't mean to make it so aggressive sounding. I think that there's a balance that we're working toward, hopefully. You know that there is there to strike. And so I see my pieces as like allowing space for the clay to speak, for the earth to speak through it. And when I'm working, I'm very tuned in to, I think I'm asking the clay and me a lot of the same questions. So I ask us, what is our reach? How thin can we be spread? How much space can we take up? How fragile are we? How strong are we? What do we want to express? What are you in close relation to? How can we be in balance? And so I'm kind of negotiating a collaborative effort in my mind. So I think that's different from what our knowledge systems, at least like Western knowledge systems, allow for or teach us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that one of my theme of the practice is really the blurring the boundaries and breaking the boundaries, possibly extending. So that to me that, in a sense, that very traditional Western fine art materials, is somewhat limited. I think it has a great potentials and then possibilities, but I feel like the magic of art and being an artist is that I can actually choose any medium I want it, and then put my little spell and magic to it, and then it becomes the work that speaks first to me, and then hopefully that the ideas and expression can relates to the other viewers. And so I feel like using this somewhat secondary domestic craft-oriented materials that again has a somewhat secondary sort of like a status of the medium, I feel this is perfect for me, that I'm really speaking about my characters of forgotten people and forgotten characters and abandoned, so that to me that really creating sort of reinterpreting and then making like a different transformation about this medium. So, the felt, the wool, usually people do a very small figuring, it's about like 2 inches and 3 inches, but I buy them as pounds and they sell it by ounce. So, I just get a phone call about these vendors that, are you sure this is the right amount that you're purchasing? And I'm like, yes. And then they're like, what are you making? And I'm making sculptures, like, okay. So, I think that it's very interesting to me that I'm really kind of making this sort of path that maybe hasn't made it to the sort of more traditional sense of the medium, but why not, right? So I think that choosing the materials is very important. But again, I'm very open to any kind of materials that speaks to me, and then the possibility of it. I feel like being able to shift and flexible about my practice, I think that that's a quite important part of my work. That's how I've been evolving. So
I love that. I love the fact that it feels very fearless in a lot of ways, coming from my perspective as an artist as well, where you in some ways have been indoctrinated to believe in these hierarchies of materials and process, and to push back against that, I think is amazing and great, and that's how you get to uncharted territories and the uniqueness of your stories. Where does spirituality, what part does spirituality play in both of your processes? Deep breath.
So I think that really relates directly to my paintings and my sculpture. Those are sacred characters that appear to Japanese mythologies, folklore, and sometimes I reinvent them. Sometimes I invent them. But they're sacred characters because they're both sacred and secular. They're animated and also inanimate. Sometimes they're very benevolent, but they're also malevolent at the same time. So it really creates that my characters are against this static dualism. And I think that makes it very sacred because they can embrace every possible sort of forces. So that's why they're very free. And based on my, a lot of animism shares this idea. So the Shinto animism really about believing the spirituality in every single being in this whole universe. And the particularly interested in the Shinto is that it includes man-made objects like tools and ceramic bowls, and you see this iron cast, the things, the tools that you use to help your life easy and interesting, that we consider sacred. You know, and then I think it's a great way to remind ourselves that if every single entity in this universe has a spiritual soul, we need to respect that, right? And then not just in a human, and we still have issues and problems about this deep racism and then injustice. But like if I could even include like my shoes, you know, or just like a hand-down jacket, if those things are sacred, you know, I think it's a great practice for us to really think everything is sacred. And it's why not, right? Again. So I think that comes, the spirituality comes from that. And I think it really anchoring my practice because these mundane objects, the mundane characters, the forgotten characters are equally sacred as gods that we believe. And you know, the certain things that we seem to have more value, so that you can abandon any other maybe things or people or nature, you know. So I think that I'm really embracing these characters, and this is my way of introducing these characters in this particular context.
It also makes me think about indigenous religions that also believe, of course, like nature, the rocks, the trees, everything has a purpose, has a soul, and so it makes me think about your work as well, Brie, thinking about the clay and what it's saying to you. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think of spirituality as recognizing or understanding at our core that there is something greater than us, that we're part of something bigger, right? And I think that manifests in different ways for everyone, and for me, you know, it is reflected in the way that I see myself as part of a whole. Like the reason I started going to the desert was not only to find a different energy than what was occurring in New York City where I lived for so long, but was also to feel like that palpable experience. Is that like really sad? That palpable experience of being so small in the vastness of things, and the scale of my body in relation to the land, the earth, and the way that my work is divided, it kind of reflects that, like the parts make a whole.
Yeah.
And I find myself leaning into a lot of like intuitive inclination or like voices. I don't know, just trusting that the work is going to take me where I need to go. And I think that the questions that I ask are, what is my part in all of this? What is our part as humans? How do we live in relation to each other, to plants, animals, rocks? You know, we all share so many of the same, like minerals and chemicals, and so I really think about those things when I'm cultivating and like borrowing movements from the natural world, from what I learn in relation to it and to each of you. You know, I bring them into the work and then see what comes out. And my sister just remarked, we were looking at work in my studio, she's like, I don't know what these forms really are, but they just remind me of natural occurrences, like natural movement, things that I see in nature. And she's a horticulturist, so that was nice to like see that coming through.
I also think that as we evolve from a hunter-gatherer time, that the life was simple but also very difficult and harsh, and when we started to grow crops. And then I think that nature has it really sort of determined, like we pray for the rain, we pray for the sun. And then I think when we didn't have enough sun and rain, that was our way to explain the life at the time, saying that maybe the son of the god is upset, or maybe rain is sad, it's like that. We put this sort of a story and narrative to really describe and try to make sense the reality of it, and also remember the event that way. So I think seems to me it's a very natural way for us to connect with the natures and surrounding, because it kind of makes sense that, in our famous story in Japanese Shinto creationism, that our sun goddess was very sad because her brother was acting very mischievously, and she went into the cave, and she didn't want to come out from the cave. And then she saw this mirror reflecting there's a party going on outside of the cave, and she wanted to come out. So then we had sun goddess actually came out, so we have enough sun to have this, enough the rice field to grow. And so that's kind of beginning of the story. But I'm fascinated by all these details, like why we have to be so detailed, and is there any like a signified meaning from these stories? So, but to me, I think it's a natural way for us to relate to the world.
And I love how the materiality of both of your works play into also the nature. The material is coming from the nature. Felt is coming from nature. So you're having this reciprocal relationship with the materials as well. Selfishly, I would love to continue asking all the questions on this paper, but I would also like to give you all an opportunity to ask the artists some questions as well. So we're going to actually, open already. I know, I'm not ready to be done, but yes. So yeah, let's open it up to the floor for questions.
I think we spoke too much.
Brie, I was just wondering, where does your clay come from? What country? And do you always work with white clay, or do you work with, can you tell us about
where the clay
your
comes from.
literally the details of your material?
I guiltily work with a white porcelaneous stoneware from Massachusetts. And I live in Santa Fe. But now that I'm saying it out loud, I think my parents came from Massachusetts, so maybe there's some associative need for it. I searched far and wide on the West Coast for clay that would do what I wanted it to do. And I also experimented with harvesting wild clay. And I had a friend in New Mexico who said, you have to come work with this wild clay. It's like so full of energy and has this aura. And I did it, and it took days and days to process. And the experience itself was what I was meant to do. I wasn't meant to work with it. It just, I found that I've asked myself this question, why aren't I using local clay? And I have arrived at the conclusion that we live in a very globalized world, and where most of our materials are processed. And the clay is from this country, like from minerals that come from all over the place though. Like they source talc from Texas and this from some other state. And the commercial clay doesn't lack in aura to me. So it still comes from the same place. Yeah. And I like the porcelain stoneware because it has this buttery texture and like captures detail in this really beautiful way. Yeah. But I sometimes work with red clay and other kinds of clay from other places.
Hi, I don't know why this question just came to me, but I'd love to know from both of you, because when we're little, we think, oh, we're going to do this when we get older. When did it occur to you, oh, I'm an artist?
Okay, so I grew up in Japan, so I did manga drawing all the time with my girlfriends. It's like I have my stories and then we exchange the manga comic together. So I was always doing that. I was like 3rd or 4th grade, and I used to play piano, and everybody thought I would become a pianist. That's how I was quite serious about that. I played maybe 15 years. It was a Suzuki method. So I learned music by listening, not reading the notes. And but what I really liked about is this sort of on the way to the piano teacher, I was making notes about the sceneries, and I have a little poem about the moon. Why are they following me? And then I also in the 6th grade, I have this kind of graduation sort of notes. I said I want to become a nurse, and I'm explaining why I wanted to, and the explanation was all about the color description of the pills. And also it says this is a job that I can leave at 5 p.m. Then I can do my coloring at home. So it was just really has nothing to do with the nursing. It's a grateful, respectful, incredible profession, but I was apparently very keen towards the colors of this and the shapes of the pills. So I feel I was very into the art and music, and then the 6th grade I asked my mother to have a private oil painting tutor. That was I asked for the Christmas gift, and so I was really into drawing and painting already. So I would say, but I never ever thought about myself as a professional artist. And this is just like an extension of, the continuation of how I just now giving up doing what I want to do. So ended up as sort of being an artist now. So, but I don't know when, but I feel like I was thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. It's an accumulation of time when you're just like, I'd rather be making art, but I would have to pay the bills. So you wait until the time that you can. I think for me, it had a lot to do with like making art when I was really young was when I felt the most understood by my family, maybe. I felt like the most recognized by my mom especially, and encouraged. And just felt like, I think, I'm gonna believe her that I'm good at this. I just kept doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your practice as well as the methodology. Brie, I have a question for you. The clay, because it's a large quantity, is it the choreography or the process of pushing it? Do you take multiple days to do that, or do you wet the clay, or can you share anything about the process of actually creating that?
Yeah.
And for Miki, do you have special characters that you put into each of your works, in some of your, just like in the storytelling process?
I guess I make the work really quickly in a matter of 20 or 30 minutes. Because I want it. I set it up this way from early on, where that was the parameters were in place. Work with this amount of clay, make this composition, and that was to free my mind up from feeling like it had to make any decisions, and that is most easily achieved if I'm just in the exerted moment of working and listening and being really attuned to the material and to my own body. And I've been sculpted by my work over these years. My body's changed a lot, and I've had to change the way that I take care of my body because of that effort. But it feels like, I had to set it up that way so that the forms could emerge and not be composed or finessed so they dry the next day, and I'm separating them in various ways. Like the piece out here was left to dry on its own, so it desiccated into pieces because it was made in thinking about the Palm Springs desert. Or I'll decide how something's separated, and then it goes in the kiln very quickly after.
So I have a lot of characters in my work. But one of the, maybe in a painting characters, the fox, they usually have a double tails. That means they're not a fox in a real life. They're imagined deities. I like the characteristic of their messenger. In the folklore, they actually communicate with the deities, and then they bring the message to humans. But also like a coyote in America folklore that, foxes are trickster. So they, when we say like that, there's the wedding of the fox when it's sunny and it's raining at the same time. So we use that kind of ideas. Another sort of there's a stick figure, that the golden stick, and this is a particular folklore that this abandoned, discarded object, they're very upset. So they're scheming to sort of revenge the humans. And then the golden stick is an instigator. So they're very upset, so they jump onto the prayer beads, which that's why on my painting there's a lot of dots are scattered because they've been broken by this instigator. And then the context of the composition is a night parade of 100 demons, which is the protest march of these forgotten, marginalized characters in the folklore. So they're marching and then basically expressing their existence in a peaceful way. So those are particular characters. And since I thought we were going to get into a little bit deeper about the myth. So maybe one thing, if I may, I think it's a very important, a myth and mythologies I think it's a human history. The myths are created by us. It's not written by somebody else, so we wrote it. So it really shows who we were and who we will become. And then I think that the myth, if you believe it, becomes a religion, and if somebody else believes it, that's a myth. And then I think that the myth and the overall human history, it really shows how our lives were. So, and then the myth also becomes very real. It becomes truth. We decided to be a true story when it's not. So I'm starting to really think about these characters. These are important characters because it signifies this idea who I want to become. And I think that the mythology, the myth that we create in our time has to be very truthful and related to who we are now. So that this character, I feel like it's a projection of who we can be, free and accepting and filled with the empathy. But in our history, we created a myth that really was the best intentions and creativity, but also the worst prejudice at the same time. So there's a lot of myths justifies our dark history in America, the slavery. We destroyed the native societies. In Japan, we justify the war, all the atrocities that was caused, that was based on the myth that we believe. But at the same time, the myth can really bring people together. The story is, I believe, the only tool that the strangers can have a relationship. If you believe the same deities, if you believe the same story, all of a sudden there's a connection. And then that connection can empower because you relate with somebody that you don't know, you don't have a relation. So that to me, the story, what kind of story, the myth that we create is very, very important. We need to be very careful what kind of myth that we're spreading, so that in my painting, it's on purposely welcoming, and I want to make them as a projection of who we are. We're very different characters. One of the house, that's the straw house, that's bringing a rice bowl. You know, there's a character always trying to take care of everybody, right? You know, and then there's the instigator, and there's a mystical sort of fox. So that I feel like that mirrors sort of who we are as a community, that there's a diversity of different characters. And, you know, I want to make this myth or the story that really brings the people together and filled with the empathy, so that we don't have to go into the direction where that brings the tragedy in the future. So that's why I wanted to create this very particular myth in my work. Thank you. Sorry, it was so long, sorry.
That was just a right amount. 'Cause I love the way you're bringing the historical into the contemporary and talking about the truths that we agree on, because I think that is very applicable to the current situation in this country right now. So I appreciate that. How are we on where are we with time?
I would say maybe one more.
Maybe one more question?
Quick, maybe fun question. Leave on a light note.
Thank you so much for your this time. It's been really great. I'm curious what you both are excited about in your practices as you're looking forward.
Well, I'm excited to have been invited tonight and to meet Masako because I'm going to Japan to make work, and we haven't talked about it yet. And so I've been doing a little bit of research into Shinto because of its philosophy about looking at the natural world as a guide, and I'm really just fascinated by how. I just feel so grateful to have this practice that exposes me to things that I wouldn't necessarily, that leads me to things that I need to research and learn and integrate. And I really love learning about other, multiple philosophies, because I see how much they have in common and how much, truth there is in what they share. And so I'm excited about the new paths that open up because of art for me.
Just to sort of relate with, because you go in Japan, I'm so excited about that. So because you work with clay and a natural object from the soil, in Shinto practice, there's a notion that we're very familiar with, which is nostalgia, the sense of nostalgia. And that's not a simple way of romanticism. The etymology of the nostalgia is nosta is home, algia is ache. So that in Japan we have a lot of idea about it's an ache to be home, going back to the nature where we all came from, so that your heart aches when you see the oceans, and then when you see the sunset, and then when you put your feet on the sand, so there's that. It's the connection that you already knew, but because of this exploited relationship that we have built so far, that we might have forgotten. So it's a kind of great way to sort of enter in the relationship. That Japan has a particular landscape, and then the climate, so that I really hope that you enjoy. And I think that being an artist, like what I'm excited about is that I think the art making really is the way I understand the world and the universe. It's so complex. Sometimes I feel just grateful and wonderful, but sometimes I just feel so just devastating, just hearing about everything that's happening around us. But I think the art practice really kind of keeps me on the edge, where that I can see the both sides, and this personal challenge about making a work that brings that sort of expression in the status where I'm very happy about, And fortunately, I haven't really thrown away a lot of stuff, but there are some things that I never want to show it to anybody. And then one more thing is that being an artist, this blessing community, I feel just like-minded creative people. I believe in this community, otherwise I don't think I can go on. Just people who's just simply thinking better life and doing good. I think I'm inspired by this, my own community. So that's why I think I became an artist. It's very empowering and powerful to have this experience that we're trying to do the same thing as good as we can do. So I think that's what I'm excited about. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I also want to say thank you, Hunter, for collecting and diversifying the collection. You're forging paths for women artists. They've always been here, but it's nice to see us in a contemporary setting this way. And so I'm excited to see, more. Yes, so thank you. I appreciate it. And also thank you to the Anderson for this opportunity. Thank you to Masako and Brie for this very fruitful conversation, and I will continue this at dinner with you all. But yeah, did you want to?
I just want to thank you. It was amazing, and thank you for being in community with us all here tonight. The show is open tonight until 8, so please experience their work directly. I believe there's reception, food, drink outside as well. So please eat, drink, and be merry. So thank you.